Well, all year they were talking about corked bats, and we're taking bats back, and bats are being x-rayed, and I believe the St. Louis Cardinals even bought an x-ray machine, or they have one in the ballpark, and they were trying to x-ray people's bats, and a few people who never hit home runs before were all of a sudden hitting home runs, and a lot of people were getting suspicious. Now, whether or not any of these people use corked bats, I don't know, because it's very difficult to tell just looking at the bat. But in Houston one night, Billy Hatcher swung at a pitch, and the bat broke, and Keith Moreland picked it up at third base for the Cubs, and absolutely astonished look on his face. I mean, he brought it into the plate umpire, who brought the bat down to me. I was working first base, and I was the crew chief. And it had a nice little line of cork inside cellophane, inside a grooved out portion of the bat. And I'd never honestly ever seen a cork bat before, the inside of it. And so I said, gee, that's what it looks like, you know. I'm glad to see that. So now we have a situation where we got it out. We had runners running around the bases and everything else, and we've got it out. So I called down Hal Lanier, who's the third base coach and also the manager of Houston, and showed him the bat and explained to him what we were going to do. And Hal didn't say anything, but I turned around and I pointed to Billy Hatcher and called him out, and then brought the runner back to first base, and Hatcher set a high jump record for a Houston athlete. He leaped about 20 feet in the air and started screaming it was the pitcher's bat. And I'd hate to be in a robbery with Billy, because he gave up the pitcher and about 9 guys in the bullpen and everybody else who might have had a bat, but he didn't have the bat. And it turned out that the name on the bat was one of their pitchers, and in probability it might have been one of their pitchers' bats. But he was still out, and he lost 10 days for it, I think.
And then there was the Pascual Perez incident.
But Atlanta and San Diego were with first and second place ball clubs in those days, with San Diego leading. And Perez hit the first batter of the ball game. He hit this guy Wiggins of San Diego, hit him with the first pitch right in the back, and here we go. We had no reason to believe that there was anything going on between the two clubs. And apparently there wasn't. It's just that Pascual comes from another time zone, and he figured this would help them out. Well, Dick Williams is a kind of a combative manager for the Padres. He decided this wasn't right, and so he started to throw at Perez every time he came up. Well, that wasn't a problem, throwing at Perez. We all kind of expected it. And I had talked to Steve Ripley, who was the plate umpire and was new in the league at the time. I said, Steve, whatever you do, every time Perez comes up, when they throw at him, forget about everybody else, just warn the pitcher and get in front of Perez that he doesn't get away from you. And Steve did the greatest job I've ever seen. Every time Perez came up, they threw at him, he grabbed Perez, and Perez never got in the action. Of course, a little later, Perez didn't want to get in the action because there was about 40 guys trying to kill him. But it came down to a situation where we had, we stopped it the first 4 times they came out, I believe. And the first 4 times they came out, there was no punches thrown. But then the last 2 times it got a little bad, and I ended up on the ground, rolling on the ground one time trying to get Gossage and a couple of guys off somebody. Joe Torre and I ended up standing nose to nose on the mound, explaining things to each other. And it got a little hectic in that regard. I also had to go out and talk to Gene Garber, who was the last pitcher, who was interested in continuing it going, and I had to almost beg him. I said, look, Gene, let's get out of here. I also had to do something that I've never had to do in the big leagues before or since, and I was cleaning the benches of all ball players.
The San Diego Padres have left their dugout. The entire team of the San Diego Padres has left the dugout. Gene Garber has come to the mound. All of the Padres have gone back to their clubhouse.
We ended up the game with no ball players on either bench, and we had 11 arrests in the stands, and we threw out 16 or 18 ball players. We had a little guy from Japan over learning how to manage with Dick Williams, and we had to physically carry him off the field because he didn't know what was going on, so we had to get him out of there. And the best thing about the whole thing was, as I'm walking back to first base after the last riot, the head of security came over and told me that we had everything in hand now and not to worry anymore. And I thanked him and went back to first base.